Okay, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final and third segment of our wild turkey hunting webinar series, Hunting Techniques and Strategies. My name is Walter Deet James, aka Just Deet, Hunter Engagement Coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife. And tonight I have with me our upland game bird biologist, Hannah Plumpton, our District 4 wildlife biologist, John Henry Harrelson, and Master Sergeants Nathan Cox and Eric Gleason from our Enforcement Division. So we welcome you tonight. Again, our webinar rules of engagement go as follows. The length of it is 1 hour. It will be recorded and distributed by March 1st. It needs to be processed, so it won't be available immediately, and it'll likely be before that, but I'll get the recordings along with the webinar, post-webinar surveys out as soon as possible. Our question and answer length is 30 minutes. Sometimes we run a little bit over. We try to work with you, though, get all the questions done. We asked you to put your questions in writing, and although topic specific, we are also willing, as a special extra for this last one, we'll also address any questions from our first night, which is biology for hunters, regulations, where to hunt, and scouting. And also for last night's firearms, ammo, clothing, footwear, miscellaneous equipment. So our topic tonight, again, as you know, is hunting techniques and strategies, but we'll address all in the questions. We asked you to allow us to cover the information before you start asking questions. And we do prefer that the questions are not addressed during the webinar. The intent is to get you to focus on the content and listen to what's being said in the images instead of writing and getting answers, and then you're not paying attention. And then ultimately what happens is people will ask questions at the end from what we've already covered. So help us out. Chat hand raising may be monitored. Again, we're staying topic specific. It's just a little addition there. The brief programmatic why repeated for each webinar, and that's because it's the reason we're doing these. As I always say, the website is where everything is, as well as the Regulations Digest. And before you do ask any questions, especially after the webinar, check out our website and the Regs Digest. It has everything. But obviously, if you can't find something, it's okay to reach out. And again, thanks for joining us. This is the primary reason why we do have these webinars, as well as what you're going to hear about a GSO. And if you've been attending, you already know what that is. We've been on a precipitous decline since the 90s relative to hunting participation. This is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife survey done every 5 years, and we're anticipating the 2021 assessment to probably be available by the summer. North Carolina license holders and estimated active hunters a little bit different when you're looking at it. As you can see, license holders pretty high and increasing. One of the things that's really popular here in North Carolina is those lifetime licenses, and many of which people do not even use. They're often given as gifts, but it definitely benefits the Wildlife Endowment Fund and conservation. Then you see the estimated active hunters, relatively stable overall, dropped off a little bit in the last few years, but being involved in this myself, and most states have a recruitment, retention, reactivation person relative to hunting, stabilization is a good thing. So really at this point, that's my intent. Our biggest concern, or at least mine, is my generation, baby boomer, or as I like to say, the greatest number of modern day North American hunters of all time is aging out, and we're going to leave a big gap. And so that's another reason to be concerned relative to participation, as we don't want to lose this activity that we've come to care so much about. When you're looking in terms of the entire state population as compared to how many people hunt and even license holders, a very small percentage of that population, folks. We're a very small group, relatively speaking. And that is one of the reasons why we want to remain very positive to society and thinking in terms of public trust resources, and that's what they are. Wildlife belong to everyone and are held in trust by state and federal governments for everyone. And obviously we get to hunt species by regulation, but we need to get those people that don't pay attention to the regulations, which at one time with no regulations, we almost lost everything. We don't ever want to see that again. So if you see something, say something. You've got a phone, take a picture of a license plate, whatever, but we want those people apprehended and fined. And obviously this happens everywhere, and not just with hunters, but with anglers and even people driving along the roads. And it's so sad. Why would anybody want to litter the beautiful outdoors? But it happens. Point, if you pack it in, pack it out. This happens to be from a camping area on a game lands. And it's terrible seeing these things. And even in the top right photo, if you need to use the restroom, you know, even a cat will cover it up. Get off the beaten path, go, and then at least cover it up. Be responsible. Other people are out there walking around, and we don't want to look bad as hunters. I'm involved in 2 main programs, and that is webinars, which you're seeing now for both novice and experienced hunters. And then the GSO, that is for individuals, as it states there on the top, who have never hunted, have very minimal experience, and lack social support. If this webinar series thus far has been daunting, it's like, oh my God, that was just way too much. I'm not getting it. GSO is for you. If you don't have that support, you haven't grown up in a hunting family, reach out to me, gso@ncwildlife.org, or you saw my email right up front, walter.james@ncwildlife.org, and we can get you in a workshop. And so, yes, we serve both our active hunters via the webinars, our GSO via the new folks, and we also need assistance from our experienced hunters with GSO workshops. They are basically experiments to offset participation decline, and it will be determined down the road whether it's going to be effective or not. These are conservation groups that currently help with webinars and GSOs, but even within them, it's just a small group of folks, very dedicated volunteers. We still need support, and that includes instructors at GSOs and also post-GSO hunt mentors. Also applicable venues, if you have a property and you're interested in hosting a GSO, and that's not a hunt, it's just a workshop. The hunts come later somewhere else, unless you're interested in offering a hunt, reach out to us. And there's obviously the email. And, you know, I will share right now that I was one of those hunters that saw the 1972 Sidney Pollack film starring Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson. When I saw that movie, I wanted to become an 1850s fur trapper. Of course, that kind of went away, but I've always been a solo hunter. I've always wanted to be outdoors and spend time alone. And a lot of people do. We have some people out there that are super mentors, that they mentor so many people, their own family members. I don't have, you know, family directly, whether up in, you know, my family's up in PA, but after 25 years in manufacturing and coming into this job, I was given the opportunity for my love of hunting now to pass it on to thousands. And so you don't have to be an indirect mentor. You can be, a direct mentor. You can be an indirect mentor, assist us with programming. And believe me, it's humbling. And so I can tell you that you're always welcome, and it changed my life. It'll change yours. And here's an example, very bottom of our homepage, volunteers. There's a number of different volunteers in the agency, but of course, Getting Started Outdoors is one of them. So we hope to hear from you down the road. And this is, again, our experienced hunters. And even if you're not an experienced hunter, we need logistics assistance. So those willing to help with other things. So we're starting out with what's called My Typical Hunt Start to Finish, including setting up on harvesting a gobbler. And the first up is John Henry.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Glad to be back. So when Dee asked me to come up with what my typical hunt would be, I thought I would first tell you about what like my dream hunt is. And if you get into turkey hunting and you talk to folks, this scenario I'm about to describe happens maybe like 1 out of 20 times, 1 out of 50 times. And that's actually on harvested birds, not 1 on 50 times going in the woods. So I like to get in the woods about an hour before it gets daylight. Turkeys start gobbling probably 30 minutes before daylight, and peak gobbling is right about the time you can see and right after the time you can see. So I would probably go to a predetermined location where I've already scouted birds and knew they were there. Get an owl hoot out, or shoot, even they gobble on their own. So I just know they're still there. Go to a nice comfy oak tree, put out my decoys, sit back, listen to the world wake up. And listen to those birds go absolutely crazy, gobbling at other hens, at owls, at woodpeckers, at a plane flying over, and particularly at me. And in every call I throw out to them, and 6 longbeards fly out in front of me, and they come in strutting and fighting, walk right up to my decoys, and I get to harvest one. That is like what you see on TV. I mean, that's what a lot of turkey hunting on YouTube and on social media is portrayed as. However, that very rarely happens for people, and particularly it very rarely happens for me. Just usually because I don't know exactly where they're going to fly down to, and there's other competition and all kinds of factors that lead to success in hunting. So I'm actually going to tell you about a hunt I had last year. This is actually a hunt I harvested a turkey on. So this is the place. This is one of the places I hunt. I help manage this farm. It's in Eastern North Carolina. And so what you see is kind of typical. You got some pine trees, you got a swamp in the bottom, and then you got some ag fields. And I will tell you, this place is a little different. This landowner likes to manage for rabbits. So that means we spend a lot of time doing habitat improvement projects, which in turn benefit turkeys in a lot of ways. So from previous experience, I know birds like to roost in those red areas. Those red stars are where I have heard birds roost at before, have seen birds roost at before. And so being as I've hunted here a couple of years now, I have that previous knowledge. So this is kind of what I'm expecting. And on this particular morning, actually, hold on, let me go back. These 2 yellow stars here, those are typical places I like to go listen to. Both of them are on high points on the farm. Actually, there's some topography here, and you can hear most of the farm from either one of those places and off the farm. But however, as green up occurs, or you get later in spring and there's more leaves on the trees, you can't hear as far. Sound is muffled by those leaves. So in May, it's going to be different than when it's in early April. So this is actually a picture from that morning. I was standing at that northern point, kind of looking back toward the sunrise. It was a beautiful morning. And that particular morning, I heard 3 different groups of birds gobble from my location. So those ones to the north were obviously the closest. And those are places that I would expect turkeys to be. The day before I had hunted, and birds were roosted in similar locations. And so the morning before, I had went to the south and kind of hem and haw with those birds across the swamp, and they never came across the swamp toward me. And so this morning I was like, well, I'm going to go up here and mess around with these birds to the north. And so I kind of moved into this position, you see, and the birds moved out into the open field. And now I couldn't see those birds, but from calling back and forth, I could tell there was at least one gobbler, there was multiple hens, and there was likely a couple jakes out there in that field. And so 45 minutes goes by. I'm doing a couple calling sequences. I'm tucked up on that linear opening right there, hoping those birds are going to pinch down here to this corner and come check me out, or come over here to this food plot here. It's sometime, but I know right now it's just a waiting game. They're up there in that field displaying. I wasn't where they wanted to be right off the bat. So in turn, it's a sit and wait, because I'm not hearing any other birds gobble from my listening spot. About 45 minutes goes by, and these guys come out, and you can see that's my decoy set up on the roadbed there. I actually had a video. It was a little too big to embed tonight, that had these jakes. It was actually 3 jakes. And I figured out they were jakes beforehand. That's why I had my camera out versus my gun up on my hip ready, or up on my shoulder ready. They were actually jake yelping, or gobbler yelping to the gobbler and toward me, because I was yelping as a hen. The longbeard out in the field was gobbling back to me, And then these guys were yelping back to him and toward me because they could not quite gobble yet. And so those 3 jakes came out. I chose not to shoot one because you only get 2 turkey tags, and I like to chase longbeards, but honestly, I like more mornings in the woods. And if I shot one of these, that means the morning was over at about 8:30. And honestly, I just wasn't ready for my morning to be over. So I told you guys we do a lot of habitat management on the farm. And one of the things we do is prescribe burn in our pines and even down in our hardwood drains. And we have seen significant increase in turkey usage of those pines and of those woods after we burn. And so last spring or winter, we actually burned, and we it also burned some of our CRP grass up on top of the hill. And so this farm, well, actually we had disc it as well. It clicked over a little quickly there. So on this farm, we try to manage about 25 acres of grass for wildlife habitat. And when I say grass, I mean native warm season grass, not like grass in your yard. So we have CRP buffers along our fields, and that offers great nesting cover, great fawning cover. And then through some manipulation, we have great brooding habitat in the spring. So I really spend some time and effort to try to manipulate the getting turkeys. And so this morning, I was really happy with my results. I had seen 3 turkeys, had heard a couple more. It wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but tagging a bird isn't the means of success. That's not the measure of success when turkey hunting. And so after those birds had walked off, that longbeard went to the north. He wasn't going to mess with me. He had hens with him. I decided to get up and kind of maneuver my way across the farm. And so I stopped and called at 2 or 3 of those places along my route. And that route probably took me 45 minutes to walk. And that was probably 400 yards. And so you can tell I was really trying to be quiet, slipping, looking for birds, listening for birds, wanting to hear another turkey and wondering what was happening to those birds that had been across the swamp earlier. And I get up to that next star you see, and I was looking out into this linear opening here and into that food plot with my binoculars, and I happened to see 2 longbeards. Now, I hadn't heard either one of those birds gobble. I had actually been calling just 10 or 20 seconds before I saw them. Looking through my binoculars, a bird flashed by and he was strutting, and then another strutter came into view. And so obviously I sat down right where I was. And over the course of the next few minutes, with literally just using a few purrs and scratching, one of those birds broke off, walked up that linear opening, and came right into the woods right toward me down a logging road, just as pretty as you can be. And it ended up looking like this. And you can actually see the logging road he walked up behind me there in the selfie picture. And you can look behind me and you see the opening that he was in. And that's actually an orchard we planted about 50 different fruit trees that are native, a lot of flowering trees, trying to create habitat for lots of wildlife. And so that bird never gobbled one time. And if I wouldn't have been paying attention and looking up ahead of me, I would have had no idea that he was even there. And from the time I saw him and until the time he came up there and killed him, it was probably 5 or 10 minutes at the most. And meanwhile, I had been calling all morning and had never heard either one of those gobblers gobble. So I'll finish up here with this. I would encourage you, if you are successful in a harvest, to take pictures. So this is a picture of a bird I killed 2 years ago on that same farm. You can see where we had burned behind it. And that morning the grass was soaking wet. And then I gave him an hour and he dried out and looked like that. And it looks like a completely different turkey. The photos were night and day difference. And I believe, you got to honor those birds. I try to keep as much as the bird as I can. And I encourage you to do the same thing. So that would be my normal turkey hunt. And this is actually that turkey I killed last year. This is a little mountain I put together. I can't do all my turkeys like this because you wouldn't have any wall space after you kill a couple. But those special ones, really try to make something of them, or at least I do. Remember those birds long after that breast and thigh meat are gone. And I want to end on this. So this is actually right up in that food plot where I could see those birds, and using trail cams. If you have access to trail cams, that's a good idea to put your camera out here and let it scout for you. There's no feed out here. This is just an open area where I know birds like to come and scout. And if you look here, these two pictures back here, that's actually a couple days after I killed that bird. So there was another tom there, likely the bird that was with the one I shot. So it didn't kill anyone there, didn't run him off. And that's turkey thighs. If you don't know, we're going to cover a recipe real quick right here, Deep.
Mhm.
Are we going to go ahead and cover the recipe now?
Sure. Yeah, because it goes right into the next segment.
Yeah. So turkey legs, that was something Deep wanted me to cover as well, is like a good recipe that I like. So a lot of people like to fry up your breast meat. Not gonna lie, turkey nuggets deep fried are incredible. I mean, that's one of my favorite things. Is I've eaten so many of them. I enjoy them on the back of a truck. Camping, you can't beat fried turkey. But this is something a lot of people throw away. And so I tried to start figuring out ways I could utilize it, ways I could do something with it. And my family's in the tacos. And so we like to make a crock pot recipe where we end up putting them in the crock pot for a couple hours and then taking them out and braising them, getting it hot. And of course, I didn't take that picture. I don't quite make pretty photos like that, but that's the gist of it. And if you're interested, that's kind of that's the meat and potatoes of it right there. Not much to it. Your favorite tortillas, your favorite fajita seasoning, and a couple hours in the crock pot on low. And those turkey legs that a lot of people leave in the woods will be some of the best eating you can have. So Deep.
Awesome. Thank you, John Henry. Yeah, you'll hear some more about recipes toward the end, and you'll also hear me say, no doubt, if you were to Google wild turkey recipes, whether it be wild turkey breast or wild turkey legs, you'd get like 1 billion. So believe me, there are so many recipes. And granted, we have a few, I'll share like 2, but for the most part, there's so much out there, folks. That's one of the advantage of the WWW, World Wide Web. So, okay, to start out, 3 primary turkey hunting methods, folks. Run and gun has always been my favorite. That's where you're moving and calling until you strike a bird. And I can cover a lot of ground, and typically in between calling, maybe I'll move about 50 yards depending on the topography. And I've often talked about mountains, and granted, I will say that I grew up in Ridge and Valley, so I've always liked the ridges. But by the same token, there's a lot of good turkey hunting in the Piedmont and the East. And in fact, I, for the most part, go to places where there's not a lot of birds, but I've been going there since the 90s. There's special places that I go to get away. So just a little bit of TMI there. Then there's the slow down and sit down, less aggressive approach. And I will say this, as birds become pressured, whether it be human pressure or predator pressure, a slower approach, lighter calling, not so loud, like we were talking in the video, call too much and too loud. This is a very good approach. And especially as I'm aging, I'll be having 63 candles in September, this is probably going to be a better one. I can still run and gun, but that can be a good one, especially today. Then there's the patient wait, and typically done in a blind on property. If you have a place on a property, a private property, or just somewhere you found that birds will frequent an area consistently, just go there and wait. And whether it's in a blind or not in a blind, for me, for the most part, and of course, I'll probably get into that in a minute, I'm going to places that are quite a distance away. I haven't had time to pattern birds. And so I'm basically going in blind. So I'm moving and calling until I strike a bird. Okay. Roosted ain't roasted. And what that means is the greatest situation to be in is to have that, know where that bird is the evening before a hunt. And you can do that by going out in the evening, listening. Sometimes bird will gobble when they fly up to roost. Sometimes they won't, but you can elicit that gobble to talk with one of those locator calls, like we say, a crow or an owl hooter. But the point is, in the morning, he may already have a predetermined place he wants to go, and it likely isn't going to be you. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I like to let nature first. I don't like to blow any calls. I like to let the earth come alive, birds start singing, let things happen naturally. Then if nothing happens, then I'll use a call. So where does he want to go? If you've been patterning that bird, if you had the opportunity, like I often say to folks, if you're retired, you have absolutely no excuse, because you can get out there prior to the season and pattern birds, especially if it's not too far away. If you know where he wants to go, you be there. He'll likely have a strutting area or a field. You be there. You don't even need to call. Always avoid barriers when you do set up. Put yourself in a position where there is no creek in front of you. There is no log in front of you. There is no wire fence in front of you, because turkeys notoriously, not always, they have the ability to fly, jump over everything, but they'll oftentimes hang up, strut back and forth around that barrier and won't come. And if that barrier is outside of your effective gun range, you're just waiting. You're just waiting. He flies down, now what? So if he doesn't fly down when he's roosted and he's going well, he will fly down, but if he goes somewhere else, then okay. If you don't know where he's going, you can potentially make a circle and move around him to try to get him to respond. But if he's silent, you're likely going to bust him. If I have a bird that doesn't work in the morning, especially if he's with hens, I'll just keep moving, calling until I strike another bird. Cut and run, but don't call when moving. And we say, when you're moving on a bird, do not make turkey calls, like we said in the video, because once you start making a turkey call, at any time he could break and you wouldn't know it, and you would get caught moving. So use locator calls when you move on a bird, especially if he's vocal, and you can often swing out around and get in front of him. Hung up, know when to move and where. If that bird is hung up, there's a reason he is. Maybe there's a barrier you can't see. And so you may be able to move a distance away, either to the left or the right, and wide enough so that the bird don't see you, and get him to move into an area where he's more comfortable. Non-calling techniques, and obviously this is an advanced tactic, throwing it in, but John Henry did mention it in the video. Scratching in the leaves sometime, among other things, can make a bird come in. Ladies in the AM, dead in the late AM or afternoon. What does that mean? I've many a times encountered turkeys in the morning that had hens with them. And as a guy from Missouri used to say, a turkey isn't going to leave a sure bet for a blind date in the bush. So typically he's not going to leave them hens for you. So later on, maybe after those hens leave, he will be susceptible. And it's often been said that later on in the day, a turkey, if you can get him to gobble, will answer. So I'm kind of cheating here with some of the advanced tactics and didn't realize it, but we'll get to them later. The gobbling lull is a time of day when things get really slow, typically just after first light when most of the gobbling is done. That's a great time to take a snack break and reassess the situation. Many people go home then. Don't go home then if you can hunt, either the rest of the morning or the day. Silent gobblers are the worst kind. Why? Because you can't hear them. And if you can't hear them, you've just got to sit and wait and see what happens. Nothing, and oftentimes you will hear nothing. There's some days you go in the woods that you can't even buy a gobble. But if you know where birds are or where they're frequenting, you can go there, where you've seen sign. And gobbler yelps, as were already mentioned in our video, that's a pecking order challenge. You slow down the rhythm. And that can be very, very effective even when hen calls don't work. This is where I spend my time. It's called the Red Roof Chevy Inn. I like the total immersion in the woods, meaning I don't like to leave my house in the morning, go to a hunt and come back to the house. Once I leave, I want to stay there. So this basically becomes my home for a week or 2 weeks at a time. Quite comfortable for me, but for most, they wouldn't even consider it. So for example, that's what I do, because no truck cap is perfectly sealed and you get a heavy downpour, that tarp is nice. And plus it creates a little sunshine outside. I'll always have a cooler full of ice and everything I need. And that truck, back of that truck is full of stuff. But I still make myself a nice, comfortable spot to sleep in. And I've been there in about 17 degrees in the mountains when the temps went down. So it can get a bit chilly, but I love it. That's my hunting breakfast. And typically that alarm will go off in the morning about 3:30, depending on the distance I have to walk, which could anywhere be from 1 mile to up to 2 miles away from that truck. I'll gobble these down in a quick amount of time. And of course, as you saw last night, I'll carry a bunch of food with me. Till I get to the top of the ridge, I'm partially wet. If the temperatures are below, like in this case, that moon was on a Virginia ridge top. I think the degrees were 24. I could feel myself shaking, but I knew I was going to be all right. That was a place that I haven't been for a year, but yet in the past, I've heard birds there, and that's what I'll do. Even if I've not been to a place and I'm driving 200 miles, 300 miles away to a spot, I know where I've seen birds the previous year. And so you develop those patterns. So that's where I was. Again, I'm waiting for that earth to come alive. Most beautiful time of the day. The only thing that's missing there is the dark roast coffee, because I typically carry light turkey season. Days getting brighter, the birds start singing. First, the first bird, then the second. Sometimes on real cold days, it's real quiet. I'm waiting for a gobble. I'm hoping for a gobble, but you don't always hear a gobble. By the time the sun's up, and if I don't hear a gobble, then that's when it's run and gun time. If I don't hear a bird first off, and believe me, lots of times I don't. You can have perfect bluebird days and not hear anything. And then you can have a day that's partially cloudy and they'll gobble. It's like we said, there's no absolutes in turkey hunting. So then I'll basically, from a ridge top, start moving and calling. And one of my strategies, like before I duck into a little hollow like that, I'll be away from the hollow, not expose myself, and I'll shoot some calls down inside, usually a couple of yelps, maybe some clucks. And then if the light stuff don't work, I'll cut. And you saw what that was like in the video last night. So I'll try to strike one. If I don't, I'll keep going ridge to ridge to ridge and both sides of a ridge until I strike a gobbler. Again, and I said this the other night, we showed this, know where you are always. And a good way to do that was with those mobile apps, because you'll run into like our game land signs, but other states, like I said, where it's confusing. There you have the 2 orange dots, which means public land, but then you have a poster sign right on it. So by following them edges, you'll know which is game lands and which isn't. Here's an example of that situation where you could run into is you're going along that border, but once you hit that border, that land behind that poster sign is posted. You may hear a bird down in there. I like to follow borders, but what I'll do is if I strike a bird down in there, I immediately back away from that poster sign, meaning get further into the public land. Why is that? Because if I set up right at that tree, even though I'm on the border, that bird is coming in from the posted land. And you do not want to shoot that bird in the posted land. That's illegal. That's as bad as crossing that border. So I've had sometimes really good, beautiful trees on the border. And I'm like, I can't sit there. I got to get up beyond the border to the maximum killing range of my shotgun, the maximum effective range, and then start calling that bird in. There's nobody there, but that's up to you to be ethical. Here's a situation too where you got a fairly wide open ridge. I'll hear a bird down in there. You best that I'm going to back off that ridge, because if I don't have time to set up my decoys and that bird's coming, with it being that wide open, if you're obvious right on the edge, that bird don't see a hen, he's going to get suspicious. So by backing up, getting on the ridge top, that forces that bird to say, well, okay, she's not right there, but she's up on top. So that forces him to come up to the edge. So stay away from that wide open stuff. And of course, I'll mention more about decoys here in a second. And I mentioned this the other night too. Don't get too close to that edge. There's an example by where I was sitting up by a tree one time because I heard a gobbler out this way, probably about 100 yards. And I'm like, yep, that bird's going to come right up on that crest and I'm going to be able to kill him. Not. What that bird did, he gobbled way out there, but then he shut up and he dropped down off of this side and he come all the way up below me silently. And then he knew right where I was. he come right up the crest right here, and I was right there. And that bird with that big red and white head stared right in front of me at about 3 feet. Well, as soon as he knew what I was, he pitched off that ridge and he was gone. So what that made me say is, do not ever sit in that blind spot, especially so close to that ridge. So you back up here, get off that ridge about 20, 30 yards or to the maximum effective range. That way, when he comes up, he's not seeing a human sitting right there at the top. He's got to look down in, and that way you can get a shot. Can't stress it enough. Avoid them logs and barriers. Now that one's close. It doesn't represent so much of a barrier in that spot, but those birds will go behind a log like that and they'll start strutting back and forth and you can't get a shot. And even if he's close like that, you can't do anything. You can't move. If he comes up here, he's fine, but not there. And one of my favorite spring flower, and I have to touch them, are May apples. Really awesome. I like to watch them growing up. Here was the perfect log as cover, and this has a little story, but I'll be quick. This was right in front of me. I was right here. My decoy fan was right over there. So this was well within range, meaning if that turkey was right in here, I could have killed it. Well, you can't see it so well, but that's a gobbler. And that gobbler was likely over 40 yards. It's hard to tell here because I was a little bit back 20 yards behind this or whatever. He would not budge past that certain point. And I just didn't feel confident taking the shot. I spent 45 minutes waiting for that bird to come in, maybe some soft clucks and nothing, but he would not come to see these decoys over here. Well, I ran out of time. Noon to hunt. That was in my home state of Pennsylvania. And I let that bird walk off. I ended up crawling over to my decoys because I thought I could get him another day. I just didn't want to take a chance and cripple him. And I came back and I never saw him again. So I didn't get a shot, but I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. See any barriers here? What you have is nice wide open woods. These are woods though that you would need decoys. One thing about decoys, that the idea of decoys to begin with is it takes the focus of the bird off you, especially before you start calling. Once you start calling, that bird will notice exactly where you are. He can pinpoint you are even if you shut up, even if you don't call. So when he comes up, he's looking at that spot. But if you have a decoy here, then he takes immediate focus on that decoy. That's why using decoys. But the only problem with decoys is sometimes they can scare turkeys away. They get suspicious and they leave. So decoys work sometimes and sometimes they don't. And on average, I only use decoys 25% of the time because if I'm moving and calling, sometimes I don't have time to set up decoys. I could get caught, so I don't use them. But getting to the point of the barrier, you see this line right here, that stretch of brush? I would never sit right here because that turkey likely, even though that brush is within range for where I'm looking here, he would hang up behind that brush. No guarantees he would, and he would strut back and forth, and you can't do anything. You can't get up. You would have to wait until he walks off, and then you'd have to get up and move in front of the brush and try to call him back. So again, avoid the barriers. Make the path to you as easy as possible. Great place to place decoys. If I was back here and that bird come up and he'd look down here and he don't see a turkey, he's suspicious. He's like, where's that bird? But the decoys there again, sometime can help. And turkeys love those spots. This was an example where I was coming up a trail. I was just rounding a bend. All of a sudden I see what looked like decoys right here. I'm like, somebody has decoys set up. I'm not going to go any further. Well, all of a sudden that decoy moved. So I immediately hit the ground in a split second, aimed up the shotgun. The turkey looked up, boom, it was dead. Now I would have never expected a turkey to be in there. It was thick laurel on both sides, but he chose that area to strut for hens. So even though most turkey hunters like wide open woods, these things also can be very effective, even though the habitat's thick. And turkeys move through thick habitat, but they often won't move through thick habitat when you're calling them. This was the location of the ghost. I met the ghost up there. He gobbled. I never saw him. No matter where I'd look, it sounded like the ghost was coming from everywhere. He never appeared, and I think it was a ghost of gobblers that I killed in the past. It was a beautiful mountain ridge that was wide open. Those are the places you will get caught. You will get picked out if you don't have any decoys. And at that time, I thought he was too close. I didn't set any up and he just disappeared. Who knows where he went? Here was a setup where I was up here behind this ridge top, up here about probably 30 yards away. I mean, it's hard to tell with the photo, but I was about 30 yards away. I placed my hen here, a fan, and I also had a Jake. And them turkeys come from here. I was calling, making soft calls. They come down from over the ridge, and this overlooks the Jackson River. Well, when I started making them calls, I could hear all this rustling. He came in with 3 hens. And soon as he saw, they came up here, the hen stayed here. Soon as he saw that, he was running over to beat that Jake up that was just in front of that fan. And of course, that's when I took the shot. So it happened very, very quick. And I can remember back in the day, not so much now because the birds are getting wise to us hunters. Back in the day, it's almost like you had to kill turkeys in self-defense. They would almost run you down when they were coming up, but they've got a lot wiser now, and that makes it a little harder. Just to give I found this today because I thought the best way to show a decoy setup, of course, it's an advertisement, but it happens to be a good photo. I'm a right-handed shooter. So there you see the stock against my right shoulder, and I'm holding my left arm and hand on the gun. You always, if you're a right-handed shooter like that, you want to place your decoys off your left hand shoulder. And that's because then you can, if a turkey comes from this way or this way, you can swing your gun barrel this way and this way. If you were to put if you're a right-handed shooter and you would put your decoys over here, you're limited when you try to turn your gun this way. It's harder to twist that way. It's easier to twist this way. So that's the idea. And if you were a left-handed shooter with the stock against your left shoulder, then you would place your decoys on this side. That's a real turkey. These are decoys. So that's just a little tip there. Off your opposite shoulder of where your gun is shouldered, that's where you place the decoys. Hopefully that was clear. Moment of truth tips. Take his temperature first. If that bird, when you make a call in the morning, if he's on the roost, or even if he's on the ground, if he answers a couple seconds later, he's not hot. And really what it means is you want him more than he wants you. If, however, when you make your call, he cuts you off, he don't even let you finish, and he just keeps gobbling, that bird is hot. That bird's most likely to come in, where the other one that's not hot won't. The one that's not hot, subtle calling, scratching in the leaves, being a little bit quiet. If he's hot, cut at him. I will, but it depends on the situation. Again, no absolutes. If you respond, stop calling and let him find you. See, so that's almost a contradiction, but it is true. If he's hot, let him find you. You're going to want to call, but this is often the best bet, especially today. Assume the position and get comfortable. And again, you don't want to make any last minute moves when that bird is on the way in. And once his eyes are on you, once you can see him and he can see you, you make one slight move and he's gone. He's looking for danger the whole time. Use objects to determine that maximum effective range. And remember we said about when you find out how far your shotgun shoots, then you look around and you say that tree is 20 yards, that rock is 35 yards, that log is 15 yards, and then you shoot your maximum effective range. You don't let that bird, you don't shoot at that bird unless it's at some of those ranges you've established. So you don't cripple it. Still be patient, be ready. If you need to move, again, wait till his eyes are obstructed. He goes behind a tree, move and move deliberately. He'll spot you. It's not like a deer where they're curious. He's paranoid. Do not rush the shot. It's very easy to yank that trigger. And if you yank that trigger, you can often result in a cripple or worst case, a miss, especially with tight patterns. If his head goes up after the shot, shoot again. Why do I say that? Because I lost a bird that way one time. Rolled him. He was on the ground. The head picked up. It was like he regained his conscience. He just flew off. Head goes up, shoot again. Not a body shot, a head shot. Avoid shooting multiple birds. As was said, you let them separate. You don't want to risk. You're responsible for taking one bird per day. And that's pretty much in most every state. Some maybe won't be, and you want to know those regulations. Do not run to a down gobbler. They used to show that in the old videos. You trip and you fall, you could end up shooting yourself or somebody else or get hurt, especially if you're running downhill. I know, I almost broke my arm one time. Step on his head if still flopping excessively, especially on a ridge, so that he don't roll all the way down to the bottom. It's a good idea. Tag your gobbler immediately and report ASAP and savor that woodland gift you were granted, because it is a gift. From the time that bird is an egg until it's an adult, something was trying to kill it and eat it. So for it to get at least, 2 years old, or even to Jake age, it took a lot. It's a gift. Rain, wind, and snow doesn't mean you can't go. It's very easy to only pick the bluebird days. And up here, I was freezing. That was 17 degrees that night, but I survived. Bluebird Day, the kind you love. And this is called the Red Roof Chevy Inn. It's a 2006. Bought it when I was a biologist tech in PA and want to turn it into a van or a big heavy duty camper one day, but I'm holding off. I sat out a day in that in the rain. It was terrible rain in Tennessee, but I needed a rest. That's my excuse. But here, rain, it may delay fly down, meaning the birds will stay on the roost longer, especially when it's foggy. But seek out those woodland roads, the openings, clearings, and fields, because they do move about. And even this rainy day, when I went out the next day, the logging road that I was traveling on, you could see the tracks. They were there. And I'm thinking, why didn't I go? Why didn't I get out there, set in a blind, wear my rain suit? So I'm guilty of it myself. If it's windy, you can't hear birds and they can't hear you. And turkeys will seek out leeward sides of ridges, depressions, hollows, creek bottoms, anywhere where it's not so thick and windy, because it affects their hearing, as does rain. And that's why they'll seek out those areas. Snow and sleet, also openings. I'll usually sit out a blizzard if it's real bad, but I will hunt a squall, because once things calm down, maybe the sun comes out, that can be some good hunting, folks. So hunt when you can, bottom line. All kinds of weather, all kinds of opportunity. And that was what it looked like in the back of my truck that one day. And I'd sit there eating, drinking stuff, wait till the storm goes away. So that's all the things you can encounter, especially if you're in some of the northern states or the mountains. I'm not one for taking photos, but use a nice backdrop. Make sure the bird isn't all bloody and stuff like that. Usually when I take a picture, it's just of the bird and the gun. But this one, this one kind of worked out fairly well, and very much a prize. Awesome, beautiful bird, and it's a good way to look back on the hunt. For me, one of my favorite things is the turkey nuggets, and we'll be getting to the advanced tactics soon. So hopefully you'll be sticking around. Very simple recipe. You just cut them into chunks. I use all-purpose flour, Old Bay seasoning, deep fry them in canola oil. For those of you that eat those turkey nugget, or rather chicken McNuggets, which are not good for you at all, they pale in comparison to turkey nuggets, bottom line. This is an Instapot wild turkey and dumplings, but as you can see there, I add my own ingredients. Instapot's 30 minutes, and I use turkey legs in this. 30 minutes with a 30 minutes cool down, and it's like 6-8 hours in a crock pot. One of my favorite recipes, and I love the turkey legs. And as you'll hear me say later, you never discard turkey legs. That's blasphemy. So ton of recipes online, folks. Advanced tactics overview. Okay. What we do is beyond textbook, and we more or less covered textbook, and I gave some of it away in there and really didn't realize it, because we try to throw everything at you. But this is where we have a series of things that aren't perfect situations, beyond the basics, that some of you may already know if you're an experienced hunter, and some of you are like, already, this is too overwhelming to begin with. But this, we're going to try to hit it quick, since right now we've got about 12 minutes, may run over, but we'll be quick and to the point. The ones I'm going to do are the highlighted. John Henry will do the other ones. And then the only way, say, for example, after I cover what I'm going to cover on the top one, if John Henry can add anything else, he absolutely will, but we won't repeat anything what anybody says. The idea is just to give you everything you got with this. So, talkie-walkie gobblers and a sneaky hen, two different things, real quick. And since I'm semi-dry, I'm going to take a drink. He's a gobbler that's walking, talking, but he don't answer anything, especially hen calls. So here's what you do. Two things. One, if you know where he's going, if you think you have an idea at a strut zone, Go out there and just set up and wait for him. Don't even make a call, because if you make a call, he may stop coming. The other thing, 2 birds I killed in Pennsylvania one year were answering everything but talking and walking. But when I used that gobble shaker, they went silent. But I decided to wait, and they came in, and he didn't come in looking for a fight. He was looking for a buddy, but he wasn't answering any hen calls at all. And again, if you're hunting public land, be very careful and probably don't use it at all. Sneaky hen, New York bird. I was a distance away from a gobbler that was gobbling near a pond, and I was in these really small pines, and there was a logging road right next to it. So it was a good hideout. Everything I threw at him, he just wasn't coming. He was gobbling down there, and nature was taking its course when all of a sudden I heard something walking behind me. It was a hen, and I was between him and her, which is kind of a good place, but not a good place, because as you know, that was nature. She was going to him. So I thought, what am I going to do about her? Because if she gets to him, he will shut up. He's got his lady. So all of a sudden I waited till she got real close. Didn't call anymore, waited till she got real close, jumped up, spun around, and started cutting really hard. She started to putt. Remember the loud noise in the video? She started to cut, but I was able to cover it with my loud, annoying voice cutting. She flew off. 10 minutes later, he came in and I killed him. Okay, John Henry, anything to add? You're up next.
Nothing to add, Deet. Henned up gobbler. So a henned up gobbler is a gobbler that's got a couple hens with it. And like Deet said earlier, why leave a sure thing for something that may not be so sure? My tactic on henned up gobblers, number one, if I got a lot of land to work with, go find the gobbler that's gobbling, that's willing to work with me. If I don't have a lot of land to work with, or I don't have another place to go, then I'm going to hold tight, because oftentimes what happens is those hens are going to leave that gobbler to go off to their nest to lay their egg. And come 10, 11 o'clock, he's going to be lonely, and he's going to remember that hen that's been calling to him all morning. And, you know, you're not calling a lot, but he's going to remember you. And sooner or later, he's going to come over there and check you out. And that's my number one technique for henned up gobblers is patience, or go find another one that's willing to work with you.
Yes, absolutely. Field gobblers. Well, that's probably not one so much for me, but because I'm mostly in the woods. But the advantage with field gobblers is that if they are going to those fields, you have 2 options. One, if there is likely a road going into the field or out of the field, or just an area that they frequent, you go to that area, you set up, you wait for them to come in there, and you just be ready for them. Don't even make a call, because sometimes if you make a call, that can cause a dominant hen to do one of 2 things. One, either want to come and fight you, or want to come or want to get away to take her gobbler with her. And so you be there when they're coming in. The other thing to do is, if you do have a set of decoys, and this is a dominant gobbler, you set up your batch of decoys in there before daylight. If you know they're going to fly into that field as a group, you set up your gobbler in there and maybe some other decoys. And if that other bird's a dominant one, he'll come to run you off, and then you can get to kill him. That's enough for me.
Deet, I'll add, if you have field turkeys, especially if you're down east and you have a big giant field, I like to scout the night before and see where they fly up. And if you know where they're roosting on the edge of that field somewhere, I try to get as close as I can and get them right after fly down, and just be patient. Oftentimes those hens in those field turkeys will take them the other way, but be patient. So for hung up gobblers, that's a gobbler who's coming part of the way, but either he can choose to hang up at 100 yards, he could hang up at 60 yards. Either way, he's not coming closer. He's not coming any closer. He's made up his mind. He's usually strutting. He's usually been spitting and drumming, and he's waiting on that hen to come see him. Honestly, if you don't have decoys and you're not, he can't see you, that may be part of the issue. He can't see a bird that's calling, so he's looking for where's she at in the bush. I don't want to get too close to something because they could eat me. my biggest go-to is to wait for them to turn around and maybe get aggressive with them. Call to them, cut at them, see if they respond. If they turn around and walk away, oftentimes I will let them walk away and try to get up and get in front of them. He may just not like the setup that you're in. He may just not be willing to come to you at that moment, but that doesn't mean in another setup 100 yards away that he won't be willing to come to you. So be willing to adapt. I'm not married to any situation, to any calling sequence. Just you got to get out there and try and learn what works for you.
Yep, absolutely. Be flexible. Try something new. Circling gobblers. I go back to the days, again, the late 80s, and I can remember very specifically getting out there in the woods. I'd hear two gobblers up on a knob, and I'll never forget the situation. They're gobbling on a knob. I'm on the other knob. It's probably about 300 yards away. And soon as they hit the ground, they started running side by side right into a saddle right for me. And again, I was afraid I would get killed, so I shot one of them in self-defense. Nowadays, they're more likely to circle you. They're coming in, they're used to the predation, whether it be natural predators of the the variety of hawks and owls and all the other creatures, and human pressure as well. And they're more likely, they'll hear your call and they'll come a certain distance and they're looking for a hen. They know where you are. Even if they didn't see you, they know where you called from. Their hearing is incredible. So they're circled. They're looking for a hen. Well, if you don't have decoys set out there, if you weren't able to set up decoys because you didn't have time, again, you strike that, if I'm moving and calling, and I strike that gobbler close, I don't have time to set up decoys. That is a good time to give them something to look at because they are looking for that hen. And if they don't see the hen, they get suspicious. The other thing I'll let him do is I'll just let him circle and he'll walk off. And then I will reposition myself. Or if he continues to call and gobble, I'll try to get out ahead of him and intersect him. And that's about it.
So runway gobblers, that's a scenario where you have a gobbler who is gobbling and you kind of figure out which direction he's going in. He walks one way and then he'll get to a point, usually on a ridge or a roadbed, and he'll turn around and walk back. And he'll be doing this for quite a period of time. And usually what he's doing is he is strutting in an area, or that's his strut zone, and he knows hens will come to him. If you're in that situation and that gobbler's coming to you, and then the next thing you know, he's going away from you and he's coming back to you, I wait for him to start going away from me. And then I try to move up quietly as I can to get to where I think where he was getting as close as he can to me. And then I'll call back to him and try to get him to turn around and play that game with him. And hopefully if you make a far enough move, you'll get him on that return route along his runway. But you got to keep him gobbling. That's one thing. And using soft calling techniques is usually my go-to in those situations.
And the only thing I would add to that is, and it goes back from my home state where there was so much pressure. I can remember, like, if you guys remember me showing you the creek that I used to cross in the morning, back in the 90s, early to mid 90s, even though I crossed that creek in the morning to that public land, if I would have set up a coffee stand on the other side, I could have quit my job. I could have made a fortune. So if I'm moving on a gobbling turkey, I will typically throw my orange hat on if he's far enough away that he can't see me. Because you never know sometimes if somebody's moving in. I've had situations where I was calling birds. Again, I haven't encountered that forever lately, but back in the day, I'd hear a shot. I'd be working a bird. Nobody else was calling. So somebody probably snuck in between me and him and between me and that gobbler and killed it. So I would do that. I'd probably wear my orange hat when moving. Mid-morning lull tactic. Best time is in the morning vocally. And then there's this like 7:30 to 8:30 range where most hunters leave. They go home, like to do other things. That's when I sit down. I'll write in my journal. I'll have a snack. I'll get those Dove chocolates that have the really nice message in it. And then that'll help me. I'll get melancholy, and then that helps me to write a little bit better. But I chillax. I chillax at that point. By 9 o'clock, I start my routine again. and many late morning gobblers I've run into that maybe the hens left them and I was able to kill the gobbler. Because in the northern states where I hunt, you can only hunt till noon. You can't hunt all day like you can down here. So I killed many gobblers after that lull tactic rather than going home. So stay out there. That's it.
So blind calling techniques, that's where you don't really know where any birds are. It's when you set up and you go to an area you haven't scouted or you haven't been there in a long time. You may get there after daylight, after peak calling time, and you're just going to an area and kind of setting up. And my blind calling techniques are usually, I don't get pretty loud until the second or third call sequence. So I'll start out yelping. I'll do it, a couple sequences and wait 15 minutes. Do a couple sequences and wait 15 minutes. It's real hard to wait 15 minutes. I ain't gonna lie. Usually I end up doing something else, calling again, scratching in the leaves. But you need to be looking all the time, whether a gobbler's gobbled at you or not, because they can just walk up. After I do that 3 or 4 times, I usually like to give every spot an hour. So if I'm sitting on the ground, not in the blind, I'll sit there for an hour, call 4 times, and then I'm going to get up and maybe move, even if it's just relocate 100 yards, and try that sequence again, or try something similar. If I don't hear birds, that's actually pretty normal. I don't hear turkeys every time I go. So it's not the expectation of hearing one, especially when you're not going at peak gobbling times.
Yep. Pressured gobblers, the worst kind. Remember I said earlier that you can have situations where they just don't talk. They're quiet, whether it's a predator, whether they had an encounter with a hunter, and there's a situation, and well, I'll use as an example. It was a Pennsylvania bird. I'm moving along, walking. I wasn't making any calls at that point. And as I told you the other night when we were talking about the turkey hunting safety rules, turkeys are bipedal and so are we, 2 legs. So the leaves were kind of crunchy, but not too crunchy because it had rained a little bit. I'm walking, all of a sudden a bird gobbles. So I immediately said, okay, it's out there. I set up and I start calling. Well, I don't know the truth. I don't know what happened, but the first thing that came to mind, because I was in my home state and it gets pressured, and that was later on in the morning. When I called, it makes me wonder if what I was saying to that turkey, because he ran into a hunter, probably got called to, and who knows, he could have been shot at. So it was almost like by me making turkey calls, I was saying to that turkey, I'm a hunter and I'm carrying a shotgun over here. And so he just shut up and he disappeared like a ghost. So looking back, what I think I should have done, and maybe or not, it would have worked. He seemed to answer my walking. I should have sat up, not made a peep, and maybe just scratched in the leaves like a hen feeding. And that may have killed that bird. I'll never know. But those birds, they're skulkers. They walk in the woods just looking for hens. They may listen to hen talk, but they want to see a hen for sure. They're the toughest to hunt, but hey, we need those kind of gobblers to pass on to the next generation. Okay, John Henry, go ahead.
The only thing I'll add beyond the scratching of the leaves is I may call like ever so slightly. If you watch YouTube videos of hens feeding, they're always whistling and just tiny, tiny yelps and really light purrs. I mean, just barely audible. That would be maybe my only addition if I was going to call in those kind of pressure gobbler situations. Late day strategies. If I've been out there before and know where a bird's going to roost at, well, I try to set up where I think they're going to roost at. Birds oftentimes make a move, maybe it's 50 yards, maybe it's 100 yards or a couple 100 yards to their roost site, from a field, usually at least in eastern North Carolina. So I'm oftentimes looking for birds out in the field or listening for a bird. And if I can get a bird to respond to me in the last hour or 2 of daylight, oh man, I think I got something going on. Because usually if he'll gobble at me at that time of day, he's going to be willing to work with me. And there's kind of like a time crunch. He knows he's on a time crunch and so am I. And oftentimes if he doesn't make it to me, I'm going to have a real good idea where he flew up at. And that puts me way ahead of the game for the next morning.
Yeah. Now I'm going to back up on that one too, because it made me think of something. Remember when we talked about the gobbler yelps? When most cases, when hunters are hunting and they're sounding like a hen. So a gobbler yelp to that pressured gobbler could also add some comfort in that, oh, okay, I got a buddy, or just he wasn't expecting it. But I do think what John Henry also said, toning it down a little bit. I may get away with a little bit louder with a gobbler yelp. But yeah, so that's just to add to that. It made me think about it. Poor weather tactics, or strategies, you already saw that. If it is raining, get to the openings. I can remember being on a ridge hunting, hearing birds. It started raining. I knew where there was a field. It was about 200 yards away. I went down to the field, wasn't calling as I was moving. As soon as I got to that field edge, I like more or less set up, and I started making some calls. It was about 15, 20 minutes later, I had a gobbler come in quiet and I killed him. And that's where they went. Wind, there's typically, like even in lowland, you can find a low area, maybe a creek bottom that is less windy. And what I sought out is leeward ridges. I mean, there was some out in the mountains in Ashe County that, oh my God, it'd blow your hat off. But the other side of the mountain was quiet, and that's where those birds will go. Or maybe the edges of thickets that block that wind. That's where you want to go. And again, a heavy downpour, yeah, it might be good to sit out, but those birds don't go home. They don't go to a house, they're in the woods, and they will seek out those logging roads. They'll move along in those places. So if you need a break, take it. But otherwise, if that's the only day you have the hunt, you go out. Okay, John Henry.
So non-calling techniques or tactics are obviously where you're not making a turkey call. We've already alluded to one a couple different times, scratching in the leaves. Gobblers or turkeys in general hear other turkeys scratch and walk in the leaves all the time. So it would be no different. I mean, if a hen's up there calling in the middle of the day, what is she doing? She's probably feeding around and loafing. So she's going to be making noises. And the same thing with walking. I try to be quiet walking, but I've had turkeys that I thought gobbled at me walking, that heard me walking, just like Deep just said. So that could often be a tactic to use. And then we mentioned it in the video about fly down cackles, using a hat or using a wing when you're making those initial calls. Those are non-calling tactics, but really the biggest non-calling tactic was patience and willing to sit there and wait, because turkey hunting can be fast and furious. It can be really exhilarating when they're gobbling and they're coming to you, but oftentimes it's a waiting game. And that's what makes it so exciting when that gobbler does show up, is that anticipation that you've been waiting 20, 30, shoot, sometimes a couple hours with him gobbling just a little ways away from you. So,
yeah. One thing just to add to this, and it was kind of humorous. It only happened to me once. I don't know if it'll ever happen again, but I was scouting. It was a week before the season. And again, I was in the ridges, and I'm walking. The leaves were extremely crunchy. So I'm walking towards the edge of this hollow, and I get to the edge of a hollow, very deep hollow, and I heard a bird gobble, and I'm like, wow. And he's gobbling on a roost. So I thought, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to see where he flies down, goes, again, try to pattern him. And so all of a sudden I'm standing on the edge of the ridge, and I'm like, he's coming towards me. And I didn't make any calls or anything. And again, thinking in terms of bipedal, 2 legs. He's coming. I thought, well, I don't want this bird to see me because I want to be able to hunt it next week. So I ran behind an I snuck behind this rock outcropping and hid. I was in camo. Didn't I see that bird walk right by me? And it kept on gobbling. He thought I was a hen. So I thought, well, I'll let him get out of sight and I'll shoot down over the ridge. I don't want him to see me. So the bird's going, he started to get a distance away. And then I got up and started walking sideways. And didn't he start gobbling again, coming back? And then I ran down over the hill, down to the truck. Well, of course, I never saw him again. But there's an example of how just that non-calling tactic, even the walking, or that sounds, not only the scratching, but like almost like you could put your palms on the ground and just sound like a walking turkey and then scratch, things you don't even think of. So again, folks, it is what it is. This is a document that I got from this magazine. You can see it there. There's 4 pages. I'll be sending that to you in an email. I was carrying that around in the 90s, and you can see it's called Troubleshooting Turkeys. It gives a problem, the likely diagnosis, the solution, and preferred calls. And I used to provide this during the in-person seminars. There's people I gave this to, and they said, I used it. It's 4 pages long, but it gives you a situation and then something you might want to try. So you'll be getting that in an email when the recordings are completed, and we send the surveys out as well. And I think you'll like that, especially for you newbies or you experienced hunters. You want to read a good book about the wild turkey and the biology. And as you can see, it's a big book. Lots of information in there. It was one of the things I did as a wild turkey hunter. I wanted to know more and more and more and more about wild turkeys. So you want to try that. Tons of recipes online. Discarding turkey legs is blasphemy. I hated hearing hunters talking about, especially at the in-person seminars. I remember they'd say, yeah, they're not fit for human consumption. And I said, please don't ever say that again. It is dark meat, very red, similar to waterfowl meat, but it's low and slow. It makes the best, most wonderful soup. And that's why I provided you that crock pot recipe with the dumplings. I like to use egg noodles, but it is so good and so healthy. And this woman here, a girl hunter, she even shamed me. I've never saved the carcass. She would take the carcass and make stock, get a big stock pot. So see, rather than going buying that garbage in the store that's like broth manufactured, you could take the wild turkey carcass, boil that in that water, and make the finest, most healthy wild broth. And so, as she said, don't waste. You work too hard for this gobbler, and he deserves your respect. That how to process. We developed a series of deer hunting processing videos, but not yet a turkey one. We're going to do it. I found that it's from New Hampshire, but it's the National Wild Turkey Federation. It's like 30 minutes long. And it shows the process that typically John Henry and I do is you fillet the breast off and you fillet the legs off. So I will be also sending you that until we create a turkey processing video. And yeah, many fillet the 2 different meats, breast and legs, and separate recipes. And then some will deep fry, pluck and deep fry in like peanut oil, a whole bird. Wild turkeys are not meant for the roaster, for the oven. Very dry, not a lot of fat. You can do it. I have a recipe that had mayonnaise in it, and I'll see if I can dig that up too. A guy I met in Elizabeth City, mayonnaise, that he basted the turkey, put it in the roaster with one of them browning bags, and he said he loved it. So tons of recipes online, folks. I can't stress it enough. Time for Q&A. Finally, huh? And obviously, since we may have some new people tonight, first, we'll start with our officers with the most common turkey hunting violations for which there's no excuse. And then when we get to the Q&A, I'm going to narrate, and it's always good to have other perspectives. So we're going to let both Nathan and Eric, I will narrate, and they will help with the questions. And then if there's biology questions, Hannah will assist with them. So, gentlemen, take it away for the most common turkey hunting violations, and as I say, for which there's no excuse.
Like we said, the last 2 night deep, I believe that the most common violations that would occur is hunting turkeys over bait and failure to validate or register your kill.
Okay. RE decoys. I have a bag now. Thanks for the tips last night. I'm sure I'm not mistaken for a turkey. I'm deaf hunter, and I think a decoy situation might be best to e-scout. Look for signs, set, and wait. So for a decoy, there's a lot of variety, hen or jake or gobbler. Price range from 40 to 110 plus. If I was only to buy my very first decoy, what should it be, gentlemen?
Well, you can spend as much as $20 on a decoy. You can spend as much as, a couple $100 on a decoy. It's all personal preference. I growing up when I was a kid, I've killed plenty of turkeys with the foam decoys from Walmart. and I've upgraded to the high dollar Dave Smith decoys or Avian X, and they all work. Some just look a little bit better than others, but it's just personal preference.
Okay, and if, as she said though here, whether a hen, Jake, or gobbler, if she's only going to buy one, which one should she get?
I'm going to go with a hen.
Okay. Eric, agree, disagree?
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like a hen's going to be a little bit more versatile for more situations, but you can find some deals on like a hen Jake combo on different online websites like Amazon, and maybe find a good deal on both of those. But if I was going to buy two decoys, it would probably be a hen decoy and a Jake decoy.
Okay. RE decoy placement from last night, 50 to 20 yards out, but it could provide me some cover. So which side? I put it on my shooting light or other side? I think we already covered that. That was in that image where if you're a right-handed shooter, off your left shoulder. If you're a left-handed shooter, off your right shoulder. And 15, 20 yards. So what do you think, guys? Is that a good distance?
I think that's perfect. That's certainly what I do, about 20 yards.
Sounds good to me.
What time was it when you saw the birds in the field?
I think that is referring to John Henry's breakdown of his hunt when he saw the birds in the field.
Yeah, you might have to chime in, John Henry. What time was it?
Yeah, so I was seeing the birds I saw fly down that I first saw that I didn't harvest. That was probably 10 minutes after fly down. So depending on the time of the year, right about sunrise. The bird that I ended up killing that I saw right before I saw him, that was 9:30. So those birds were out there in that food plot at 9:30 strutting without a hen, without a visible hen that I saw.
Okay, and this one was already answered really by Nathan. What suggestion for good brands of decoys? He did mention that. What is it called? X. What is that? Nathan?
Yeah, it's Avian X. I mean, you've got your lower dollar decoys, the mossy oak decoys all the way to the redhead. Probably a good mid-grade decoy that you can pick up at Walmart is a flex tone decoy. That's kind of your middle of the road, and then your high end or your Dave Smith and Avian X. But another good mid-grade one is a Game Winner brand decoy. Academy sells them, but they're a dime a dozen. It's just all personal preference what you want to spend on them.
Yep, there you go. Okay, seems like I capture more turkeys on camera than deer during deer season, and we have plenty of deer. However, there are nowhere to be found during April, May. Any advice or thoughts? Go ahead, guys.
That might be a better question for a biologist, but I would say that has a lot to do with winter flocks and how they're using the landscape and where food and available resources to those birds to survive the fall and winter versus where they like to display and spend their springtime for nesting, brooding habitat, and things like that.
Hey, and Hannah, do you want to chime in on that one too, as the biologist?
Sure thing. That's pretty much true. They use different habitat in the wintertime. A lot of times also in the fall, you'll see turkeys on cameras because they're at bait traps and over corn because that's attracting to them. So that'll appeal to turkeys and why we often see them then as well.
Okay, and Hannah, I think I'll throw this one at you too. Also, I have several longbeards on camera, but none that are ever strutting. Is this a sign of passing through and not hanging out?
It could all, it depends on the area. If it's not that open area, they're not going to strut through a bunch. So they're not going to be in the strutting area. They could also be lower dominant birds. Remember, in a pecking order, it's only the top couple birds in a flock that do all the breeding. So if they're not strutting, they may not be the dominant birds.
Yes, and you know what? I just want to add one little point with that I used to experience back in my home state, well before I came down here. Prior to the season, about a month or so, I might hear 6 gobblers within a mile on a ridge. But as it progressed and I got closer to the season, I'd only hear one, and I'd I think, what happened to them other birds? And then when I started reading more into the biology, it was likely just what you said, Hannah, that those other words were less dominant. And if they gobbled, they probably got whipped. So those subdominant birds, the satellites, the subordinates, sometimes they're not allowed to have the behaviors that include strutting. So yeah, that can happen. It seems like calling is critical. Is just going out and sitting with no calling or decoys kind of a waste of time?
I would say absolutely not. If you've scouted and you know where birds are spending their time, and if you can be set up where a bird wants to be, like if you've seen one strutting in a particular area of the field. That being said, having more tools in your toolkit is only going to help your success. So you absolutely have a chance of being successful just by sitting still and waiting, similar to deer hunting. But the more tools you can add to your toolkit and your tool belt, whether that's calling or decoys, scouting beforehand, whatever it may be, it's just going to contribute to your possibilities of being successful.
Yeah, I'll second that. Officer Gleason, he's exactly right about that. Guys, don't get caught up on calling. I've literally killed a turkey using, scratched off a single Yelp call one time on a slate call, and just very, very, very ever so slightly called, and the bird cut me off. It called one time and the bird was right there in my lap. So, don't worry about calling. It's more critical about woodsmanship skills and knowing where these birds want to be.
So you are set up, the bird is hot. Where is your gun? Up, down, aiming and searching?
For me, it is on my knee, pointed in the direction that I think the bird is going to appear. Deet talks a lot about setting up on the edge of ridges. So he's waiting on that bird to pop his head up over the ridge and look for the hen. So he's going to have his gun pointed where he anticipates that bird to pop his head up, periscoping up, looking for that hen. So you want as little movement as possible because their eyesight is so good. And sometimes it so happens that where your gun is pointed, where you just absolutely know for a fact that bird's going to pop out, he surprises you and pops out somewhere else. And sometimes that happens, and maybe you have to wait until the bird goes behind a tree to move your barrel or do whatever you have to do to harvest that bird. But while I'm waiting on the bird to come in, my gun's on my knee, pointed in the direction I think he's going to come from.
Yeah, just like what Officer Gleason said, that my gun is on my knee and it's ready to go. There's actually a brand out there. It's called a knee saver. I wear one. If you're right-handed, you're going to put it on your left knee, so that way you can rest that shotgun on your left knee. And the key is stay as low to the ground as possible. So if a bird does come in, and you can make those adjustments when it goes behind a tree, but you need to be ready to roll when a bird, if a bird's coming in hot.
Okay. So we have someone that obviously wasn't here last night. What are locator calls?
Anything that is natural in their environment that's going to produce a loud, sharp call that's going to elicit what's called a shot gobble. So it can be a crow call, it can be a owl call, like a barred owl, it can be a coyote howl, anything like that.
Okay. Regarding turkey biology, and it looks like the next two are for Hannah. Regarding turkey biology, any issues out there like CWD for turkeys?
There's not a true disease that will affect turkey populations reproductively over time, that it just decimates a population to our knowledge. Now, there's possibilities that diseases could be affecting the reproduction of turkeys, but we don't know that right now. And that's one of the questions we're actually trying to get a postdoc in the works to look at. Some of our big turkey study work and some disease work we did to see if there is a connection between the two. But right now we don't have something that just slowly takes away a turkey population like CWD does for deer.
Okay, and obviously this person was listening when I was talking about some of the states that I hunt early in the season. Why only turkey hunting till noon in the north?
So the thought process is by that is it's to not disturb hens if they're incubating nests. So you're giving them some time to come out in the woods and take a break and recover, and it's less disturbance that your people are walking up on turkey and their nest and then them abandoning the nest. So that's the thought process through that.
In many states, as I discover in my state, it used to be the entire season. And now they're opening it up later, like 2 weeks, noon, and then later on, because they figure right, Hannah, by that time, the hen should be already nesting, correct?
Yeah, she's been on the nest and even closer to hatching.
Yep.
And the thought process is if a hen's incubated a long time on that nest and they're close to hatching, she's more invested. So she's less likely to abandon the nest than if she's on her first day of incubation.
There you go. I've read that there is a 2-bird season limit. I have not read anything about a daily limit.
Yes, so you can only harvest 1 bird per day in North Carolina. So 2 birds per season, 1 bird per day. And just as an aside note to go along with that, during the youth week, should you so choose to bring a youth, which we hope that you do, during the youth week, that youth can only harvest 1 bird during that designated youth week, but he still can harvest 2 birds per season, but only 1 during the youth week.
Another biology, does trapping raccoons and possums affect the turkey population on a property?
I guess the correct answer could be it can. If you have enough traps and you remove enough predators during the established trapping season, you can have a small localized effect. Now, the problem with that is the moment you stop trapping is all the predators come back in. And so that one you'd have to be heavily trapping during the established trapping season year after year, and you'd still be pulling out the same number of predators. But you'd have to be pulling off a significantly good number of predators and do that to actually affect it. Thankfully, turkeys are used to this and they're well adapted to respond to predation.
Hey,
I'll
oh,
just
sure.
if
Sure.
you don't have the time to trap or the effort to trap, I would invest in habitat management and particularly thinking about brood fields. You're gonna make more turkeys once they hatch out if you can raise them up. And brood habitat, so things that flower where insects are, is a big limiting factor for turkey chicks.
Yeah, I second that. Habitat has the best impact on turkey populations versus predator control.
Right, and it's too bad we can't stop the concrete and asphalt rush.
Exactly.
Yes, I can't agree more. What are the top signs of where turkeys roost? I don't know. I guess we could call that either a hunting or a biology.
From the hunting perspective, at least, typically what I see, birds do like to roost if they're able to, near water or somewhere they can see where they're going to pitch down in the morning, whether that's into a field or whatever it may be. But the best thing that you can really do is in your scouting, go out the night before or early in the morning and get up somewhere high and listen and try to find where they're liking to roost, because they have so many options in places like North Carolina. They don't necessarily roost in the exact same spot day after day after day after day. They may use it a couple of days in a row, 2-3 days in a row, but they're likely going to change roost spots.
Yeah, Officer Gleason's exactly right about that. Me being a mountain turkey hunter, most of the time your birds in the mountains are going to utilize the sides of ridges. They're always going to be on top of the ridges or on the back side of a ridge that allows them a good vantage point, where they can pitch off and see what they're seeing in a field as they pitch off in the mornings. So it's imperative to do preseason scouting and go out in the morning before, just to see exactly where you have a general idea of where these birds might be roosting.
Okay. I hunt in Vance County and have seen a decrease in the number of turkeys on my farm, but a large increase in coyotes on the farm. Do you think this is the main reason, or what else could cause such change, Hannah?
I don't think coyotes are the main reason. In fact, having coyotes can often be good because they eat those smaller animals like raccoons and possums that eat turkey nests. And frankly, coyotes make a lot of noise, so a turkey can hear them coming. So they don't do too much predation, especially on our adults. There could be a variety of reasons for it changing, whether habitat, there's a better spot, or the habitat in your area has just declined. Particularly on farms, I see it a lot in the quail world, is clean farming is not great for wildlife. So things like shrubby and grown up edges and field borders are great. Unmowed ditches, fence rows are all great habitat, but we don't see them as much anymore. But it could be a variety of reasons. Not saying that coyotes couldn't be a part of it, but they aren't the main cause.
Okay. What advice do you have about hunting with a partner?
That is an incredibly broad question, but
Yeah.
I would say hunter safety, practicing your hunter safety is absolutely critical. Making sure that, whoever is going to be your designated shooter, whoever's up to bat, if you will, he sits out in front. Sometimes it's a good idea for the other person to drop back a little ways and to call a little bit further behind whoever's going to be doing the shooting. A lot of times that bird will, he'll get hung up, but if he falls back a long ways, then he might get hung up closer to where the shooter is in his effective range. But the main thing is just being safe, being in communication with each other, and making sure that you enjoy your experience and your time together safely is certainly the most important thing.
Crow or owl call for early morning gobbler locator? If so, which one?
Personally, I start with an owl call, but I truthfully, I don't know that it makes a difference. One bird might like to gobble to an owl, and he might not. If the owl call doesn't work, I might try a crow call. If they don't gobble to anything, then I'll move on to the next spot and see if I can find one that's gobbling.
Okay. Does your decoy strategy change later in the season, i.e. Tom is more skittish, so remove the Jake or leave the Jake hen combo?
It's all personal preference. I've seen some decoys work. Birds come running into them, and sometimes decoys don't work at all. So it's just personal preference. One bird's going to react differently to seeing some decoys than the next gobbler. So it's just, you just kind of have to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a friend who owns a farm in Wake County, and he said he's only seen 2 turkeys there in 30 years, but he has a lot of habitat that seems, from going through the seminar, needs to be very promising. So would it be a waste of time to just go there and sit around, or better to head toward the mountains or coastal mountains where the birds are probably more prevalent?
I'll say this, if somebody is not an avid turkey hunter, there's very few people that are diligent, that actually are sitting out in the mornings, listening for gobbling, really knowing what type of wildlife is on their property other than just riding around on a side by side. So unless somebody is an avid turkey hunter and has really put boots on the ground, so to speak, that it's walking, watching birds roost, looking for scat, looking for scratching. That would be a really good idea to gauge exactly what kind of turkey population that you would have on a property. But there's great turkey huntings from the mountains to the coast. So before I would make any rash decision about going to the mountains or the coast, I would walk that piece of property if you could get permission, and then spend some time in the morning scouting that farm before I made that decision.
For sure. And I hope we didn't do you guys a disservice by talking primarily about the mountains and the coast. Please understand there are huntable turkey populations in all 100 counties in the state of North Carolina. And while I've not worked Wake County, my understanding is there's quite a bit of game land and public land opportunities around Wake County. You certainly could stay pretty close to home and find birds.
So there you go. Then often the times where we think they're not going to be, they are. Well, will scouting weeks before the season spook turkeys from the area? How about scouting during the season?
Personally, I like to scout year round while I'm deer hunting, in the winter months, year round. Of course, I do everything in my power not to get so close to birds that I do spook them. If I see birds, then I stay a long ways off. If I do bump some birds, I don't go chasing after them, trying to see if it was a hen or a longbeard or what it was. But scouting preseason and during the season are both important, right? It just helps you to put the whole picture together of how the birds are using the landscape and will help contribute to your success.
Okay. What I do want to say, folks, too, it's like 8:36. I'm keeping our people 6 minutes after. So I would say, as long as they're okay, we'll just wrap up with what we have, but let's not add any more for tonight. And, I'd say with the videos, that may rewatching them again. Meaning add any more than what we already have. We'll try to cover the ones we already have, and we'll do so quickly and concisely. But rewatch the videos when you get a chance. So we'll get these done. Regarding topography, is it more difficult hunting Highland Ridges Mountains than it is in the Piedmont Midlands? Either strategy. Go ahead, guys.
I don't know if, go ahead, Nathan.
Oh no, you go ahead, Eric.
I don't know if anyone is more difficult than the other. I think if me and John Henry got together and he hunts the coast and I hunt the mountains, then we probably have some friendly back and forth about how birds I hunt are harder to kill than the ones that he hunts. The ones that he hunts are harder to kill than the ones that I hunt. I don't know that one's more difficult than the other. It's really just you being familiar with the topography and how the birds are using that topography. As far as strategies go, we've covered a lot of that in these webinars, and it would take a long time to answer in regards to the additional strategies. I would suggest watching some hunts on YouTube or rewatching these webinars to refresh some good strategies.
Yeah, and we did. That was the whole intention of tonight's webinar. We covered a lot of stuff. So maybe that person came in later. My limited research of adult turkey predators states that bobcats and owls are number 1 and 2 on the list. Coyotes were stated that they did not take many adult turkeys. This is a true statement based on research, Hannah.
That's correct. Bobcats and great horned owls are the top 2 predators of adult turkeys. And this is because they're silent predators. Like I said, you don't hear a bobcat when it's sneaking through, and you don't hear a great horned owl, but you certainly do hear a coyote.
There you go. Why can't you bait turkey just for information? I missed the first 2 nights. Thanks.
I would say the short answer is fair chase. And I know that sounds funny. When you can bait deer, you cannot bait turkeys. But if you are a deer hunter, you probably know that it doesn't take much for a deer to learn what the bait site means. If he sees his or her buddy, be harvested out of that bait site, all of a sudden they're using your corn, but they're just using it nocturnally. Turkeys aren't like that. they will just keep on and keep on and keep on coming to that food source. And they just use those food sources much differently than other animals, and it makes them incredibly susceptible to harvest.
Hey, what is the best way to work a larger group of gobblers? Seems like they want to hang up more when they're grouped together. Any comments on that?
Sometimes I've killed birds, called 3 or 4 at a time, and it was able to kill a bird when they were grouped up. And sometimes you can't do anything with a large group of gobblers. So, the best thing you can do is use your topography, use your land, just kind of gauge how those birds are reacting. Are they hot? Are they gobbling a lot? Are they skittish? You can work big groups of gobblers, and then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So you just kind of have to gauge the temperature, so to speak.
While still hunting at dusk, a turkey flew up and roosted about 20-25 feet right above me. I could only see the silhouette. Couldn't tell if it was a hen or tom. After the bird roost, is it possible to call it back down? Part of question 1. I gave a few gentle purrs, couldn't tell if it was looking to try to find me, but it didn't budge. I didn't want it to find me, so I sat for 45 minutes in the dark before quietly crawling away. If it saw me, would it return to that roost again?
I have never called a bird back down from the roost. I am not so arrogant as to say that it has never happened in the history of turkey hunting, but I would say that it probably does not happen often. If it saw you, would it return to that roost again? It's just hard to say. That's almost just impossible to answer. If it didn't fly as you were crawling away, I would say you certainly didn't spook it very badly. So it probably just assumed that you were any other critter that moves through the woods at night, that walks underneath it. I would say if it didn't fly, you probably didn't booger it too bad, and it probably would use that roost site again.
Yeah. Absolutely no absolutes, folks. What type of tree do they normally roost in? Close to openings or middle of the woods? We kind of answered that earlier. Some tend to like to roost over water, and also Nathan said about, near the tops of the ridge or the other side of ridge. So I don't know. I think we kind of covered that. Any just very brief comment or?
I mean, personally, I
Yeah,
feel
they're
like
gonna
they're
roost where
like
they
white
think they're
pines here.
closest.
I didn't hear what she said. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Why don't you say it and I'll answer again.
I was just going to say that in the mountains, I do tend to see them use white pines, but that's not exclusive. They'll use oak trees. They'll use any tree that with branches large enough for them to be secure on.
And yeah, they'll be in big trees, but they tend to be in the locations where they can be protected from predators or escape predators easily, like being close to water or on the edges of those ridge tops where they can easily just fly off the side of the mountain.
Okay, thank you. So you shot the bird now. What do you do with it? Well, that will be in a video that you'll be getting afterwards. So we're not going to address that verbally. From the field to home, field dress or just take it. Yeah, guys, if you want to address whether to field dress or not.
Typically, I do not. I usually take it home and I do all of the cleaning at home. But remember, by law, before you move that bird from the side of the kill, you do need to punch your tag. So that's the one thing that you certainly need to do before you field dress it or take it home.
Yeah, and you'll want to watch that video on how to process it, or at least to flay it out, as well as many other videos. Just Google processing a wild turkey, and I typically do not gut mine either or field dress it because I'm close to the house. What call do I need to be best at? Well, if you didn't watch our webinar 2, you're gonna need to watch that. That was for on February 8th. You will get that recording. You don't really need to be best at any. You just need to choose, right, guys, what you're comfortable calling with, correct?
Absolutely. Pick one, practice, get good at the one. That's the best thing you can do. starting out at least.
Can a turkey kill, or were you just joking? Oh, that was mine. Okay. No, a turkey can't kill, but it was just it was something funny in that they were just running right at me and they didn't seem like they were going to stop. Now, obviously, when they would have gotten to me, they would have stopped. But that was an old thing we used to say back in the day, that you had to kill them in self-defense. Now, granted, and guys, you can feel to make a comment, you don't want to pick up a gobbler that isn't quite dead, right?
Absolutely, the spurs can get a hold of you and can certainly break skin.
But it's not a monster that's going to try to take you out. A buddy of mine that hunts a lot said a soft purr and scratching has harvested more birds than any other call. Does this have any merit? Well, I believe you heard it tonight already.
Yep,
So,
100%, 100%.
Yeah. I used to call too much and too loud. So yeah, toning it down, especially nowadays, is good. What about avian influenza in the wild turkey population? Hannah, that's yours.
So there's been a lot of talk about this high spreading pathogen avian influenza that's causing a lot of die-off. We have not seen that in wild turkeys. Now, there's low path avian influenza, which exists naturally and just kind of exists all the time. And we see that in about 3% of our turkeys, but we're not seeing, to our knowledge, any effects. But again, we'd have to do more research into that, but it's not causing any issues with this big die-offs like it is in ducks or vultures and stuff.
Okay, and there was a comment here. So no hunting afternoon in NC. No, that's not true. That was northern states. You can hunt all day in North Carolina within legal shooting hours, right, guys?
Correct.
Okay. Has avian flu been detected in NC turkey? So I guess that's a spin-off of the last one, Hannah.
Yeah, none have been detected of this high pathogen that's causing all the die-offs. We do have some of that low pathogen, but it's not causing any deaths or acute deaths.
Okay. And someone said, 30 minutes after sunset to last light. Yeah, and I never really thought about it because I don't hunt late in the day, but it is still the 30 minutes like deer, correct?
Yes, correct. 30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset.
Okay, and we're getting near the end here. We're going to move it along. Who is in charge of promoting good habitat like control burns on public land? Is there a way to get involved? John Henry, we're going to throw this one at you since that's part of your job.
On public land, our game land staff handle those control burns, whether they handle it themselves, whether they work with the Forest Service or TNC to get those burns done. As far as getting involved, if you have private land, we have plenty of folks that can come out to your property and help you figure out what would be good for your property to make better habitat, including control burns. And if you're in certain areas, there are private landowner groups, control burn groups that come out and help each other. And we can, they're called PBAs. Prescribed Burn Association. So there's one in the southeast and one in the Sandhills and one up in the middle of the coast. So if you're in any of those areas, get in touch with those guys. They'd be glad to help you burn.
Is it considered safe to shoot a turkey when it comes up over a ridge and is potentially skyline?
You always have to consider what is and is not a safe shot. A shotgun with turkey load is much, much different than a high-powered rifle at a skylined animal. That turkey shot's effective kill range is going to be significantly shorter than if you were to shoot at a deer or something to the skyline on the ridge, and that bullet's going to keep on traveling. So it is up to you to ensure that you are taking a safe shot, and that's certainly something to consider. But shooting a bird that's on top of a ridge with bird shot is much different than shooting a high-powered rifle at the top of a ridge.
Best gauge shotgun, what about a 410? This was a last night one as well. Guys, I think the best way for you to answer this one is just say, what's your preferred gauge?
I hunt with a 12 gauge.
Nathan?
Yeah, I'll shoot a 12 gauge.
Okay. Will the 410 work, John Henry?
410 with the right shot will 100% work.
There you go. Lots of preference. How far do turkeys travel during the day? Do they like to stay within 2 miles of where they roost? They're looking to move distance. That was also part of our biology segment. So I think we're just going to let that one go for the recording to move along because there's somebody threw some other ones in here. Sorry, missed yesterday. Yep, that was covered. And it's actually, you can watch the recordings. Yes. Thank you everyone for hosting Informable Insight. You're very welcome. You know what their distance the turkey needs to pitch up or down out of a roost? Hannah, you want to address that? Do you know what distance a turkey needs to pitch up or down out of a roost?
50 feet.
Um,
Just kidding. I have no idea. I don't-
Yeah.
typically, when I've seen turkeys roost, they'll hit the lowest branch and then they hop their way up branches all the way up. And then in the mornings, they'll just fly straight down, kind of take a glide typically.
Yeah.
But I mean, they are capable of flight and flying, so they can possibly fly up the entire way, but why work harder?
Okay, folks, we're going to make these the last one. We're going to finish them. So please don't add any and do watch the videos. Mini NC Mountain, what's a good crop or ground cover to plant that could be beneficial, enticing for turkeys? I guess that could be either, but John Henry, you're kind of the specialist in the technical guidance. What do you say?
Crop. If I was looking at like a commercial crop in the field, I would be thinking about winter wheat field this for turkey hunting. If I was planting crops, I would be thinking about chufa for hunting season. And then after hunting season, if I was thinking about planting something for my birds, buckwheat is a great plant for the springtime or for the summertime, produces a bunch of flowers and a bunch of seed. So that would be my go-to.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
easier-
second that.
Oh,
I was going to second that with John Henry. I do a lot of farming in the mountains as well, and notice that the best crop, especially for turkeys in the mountains, is that winter wheat because we've got a shorter growing season versus a lot of places. Chufa is excellent, but you're going to need a really sandy soil, which it's hard to find that in the mountains unless you're in a river bottom or creek bottom. But if you had to choose something else, clover would also be a good selection as well.
there you go. It's easier to kill a gobbler early in the season versus later in the season, and why, guys?
I would say the less educated a bird is, the easier it's going to be to call to them. That's just observational for me. I wouldn't say there's necessarily any science to that, but earlier in the season, a bird's going to have heard significantly less hunters calling to him. He's going to have seen significantly less decoys, and he's going to be a little bit more susceptible to those things. If he lives to later in the season, it's because he's probably a pretty smart turkey. And they get old by being smart. So
Okay, and we had an accolade here, and thank you. What is the obvious difference between turkey scratching versus Leave Russell from Whitetails looking for food? Hannah, I think you touched on that about holes versus scratching.
Yeah, I guess what's the obvious difference between turkey scratching and leaves rustled? Typically, if you're looking for the difference between whitetails and turkeys, is you got to look at the dirt. It'll be scratched up a little bit on that surface. With whitetail deer, if they're doing any scratching, it'll be divots more, single scratches, where turkeys will kind of cover that whole area lightly over the top. And if you get really deep, then you're getting into hog territory.
Yeah, a lot of times you can actually see, like if you see where turkey's scratching, they don't just scratch one area. It looks like bombs went off. So if you walk into a pine or a cattle field, or you'll just see it'll look like these mounds and mounds that are scratched up. And sometimes if you look real closely, you can actually see where the turkey's right there at the nail has actually scratched across the surface of the ground.
There you go. I see lots of turkey in the pines during the off season, but they move into the farm next to the public land during turkey season. What's the best way to get them back into the longleaf pines and off private land? I don't know. It almost sounds like a crop thing, John Henry, to attract or something. What do you think?
If I was looking to get them back into my pines, I would consider burning my pines, especially longleaf. They can handle that burning. The next thing I would suggest would be to create an opening in my pines. They're likely in those crop fields because they're strutting. I don't know the condition of your trees, but Mr. Scott, I'd recommend you reach out to one of our wildlife biologists who can come out and maybe help come up with a management plan for those pine trees and how to best manage those for turkeys if you're having trouble getting them on your property.
Okay. Thank you all very much. This series was awesome. We appreciate that. And finally, I missed the webinar tonight. Can I review it sometime in the near future? As I've been saying several nights, all these videos will be processed. They need to be pulled from what's called a cloud and made into YouTubes. And as the original press release, and as I said, for every night at the beginning, they'll be available for distribution by or before March 1. And if you are registered for all the webinars, if you're in the portal, you will get all the recordings. And if for some reason you didn't register for all of them, just send me an email and say, I didn't register for all of them. Put me on the distribution list and I will. And I'll just say, be patient. As soon as I get them, you will get them. And after this, I will say thank you all for being here. Moving to the next slide, I want to thank my panelists who were so very patient and dedicated, even though we're on the OT. Hannah, John Henry, Nathan, and Eric for helping out so much. Folks, thank you for being here. And, you know, keep it safe, folks. You know, pass it on to others. Be respectful of the land and people. And I wish you luck. And I will say finally, and I'll if my other panelists just want to say hi, bye, or whatever, they can too. I have not killed a turkey in North Carolina for several years because I typically hunt other states. It's just, again, I go to these favorite places that sometimes don't even have many birds, but that land becomes part of who you are, and then places become part of who you are. But every now and then I do hunt North Carolina. And when it's R4 retirement, I'm going to spend more time hunting in North Carolina. Again, you folks, Hannah, any final comment from you?
No, I'm just glad everyone could enjoy the seminar. And if you have more biology questions, please feel free to reach out. That is what I'm here for. And that is my job, is to answer everyone's questions.
Awesome. John Henry Harrelson, any final closing comments?
Good luck this season. Hope everybody gets to hear birds gobble and you're lucky enough to tag one.
Nathan?
Just good luck to everybody this season, and y'all be safe out there.
And Eric?
No, sir. Thanks for having me. And Deed, if you're not going to hunt North Carolina this year, you just drop me the pins everywhere you have permission, and I'll go keep those birds warm for you.
Okay, well, you can blame Kip Holyfield for that. He's the one that started getting me out there when I was in New Bern, because I told Vic French, Vic, this is too flat here for me. I want to come out there. But it is true. And to that final point about them saying Wake County, I'm just on the other side of 440. And there's birds right there along the Neuse River. Now, of course, you can't hunt there where I am. So I guess that creates some refugia. But it is true, even around the metros, you can find some turkey hunting. So folks, have a great night. Be safe out there. Thank you for so much for attending these webinars. And again, we'll get the recordings out. Enjoy your season. Be safe. Take care. And we hope to see you again soon. Everybody have a great night.
Great job, Dee.
And to you folks as well. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I really do appreciate it. Take care. Bye.